As President Biden continues to manage numerous electoral and political challenges ahead of his probable rematch against the fascist Donald Trump in November, two important but seemingly unlikely allies have emerged to reiterate their unambiguous support for the president: AOC and Bernie Sanders. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. I will reiterate that I am still struggling with some sort of like sinus infection. So if my voice quivers, I assure you I'm not going through puberty again. But here's the situation. As we know, it's a probable rematch in November between Biden and Trump. The polling shows a relatively tight election. There's ample time for that to change between now and the election. So hopefully President Biden, the Democrats, and you and I are working diligently to make that the case. Then we also have the situation where there was a recent special counsel report in which the top line note should have been an unambiguous victory for the president, because the special counsel, the Republican appointed special counsel, Robert Hur, declined to press charges against the president, said that the case could not be made. However, the media is running roughshod and rampant with extra editorial comments from Robert Hur, casting aspersions about the president's mental acuity. So that is the context for this, okay? And I want to play a couple of clips. These two are from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, probably the most famous young progressive politician in the country, and the, legislative counterpart to Bernie Sanders. She's younger than Bernie Sanders. She's in the House, whereas Sanders is in the Senate. So this is a two-pronged expression of support from AOC and Bernie. And I want to start with AOC's comments to Jake Tapper on CNN.
Do you have any concerns about his age? Do you have any concerns about whether or not he should be the nominee?
I mean, I think right now, when it comes to the president's age, folks are talking about how he's 81, but we have to look at, first of all, Donald Trump is around the same age as
77, yeah.
He's 77 years old. They could have gone to high school together. And beyond that, Donald Trump has 91 indictments. And what I know who I'm going to choose. It's going to be one of the most successful presidents in modern American history that passed the Inflation Reduction Act, that got us the American Rescue Plan, that ensured that we could pass one of the largest federal investments in climate change in U.S. history. And as far as we go, as we know, virtually all the filing deadlines have passed. There's already been a primary. Voters have outright rejected Dean Phillips. President Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee, and hopefully he'll be reelected as president of the United States.
That's an unambiguous expression of support from AOC. Again, the most popular and most well-known young progressive politician in this country. And by the way, that expression of support carries with it some degree of reputational consequence, right? Because many people, certainly if you look online, feel that AOC has abandoned her progressive roots and her progressive aspirations by unambiguously supporting the president, who is seriously much more moderate than she is, but also has made a number of highly controversial decisions. But I would argue she's conveying the support because she is well aware, as somebody who is now in politics professionally, not merely externally, not merely as a commentator commenting on it from the outside looking in. She's somebody in the thick of it now, and she understands the inevitable compromises one might make. And she's making the case that even if you're a progressive, you should support President Biden. I also want to play this other clip here. It's relatively shorter before we move on to Bernie Sanders, where she talks about the threat Trump poses to democracy.
In this country, if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States, we do not know if there will be a verifiable next election that has integrity. He already tried to, we saw on January 6th, he tried to overturn the results of a presidential election by force, by inciting a riot. And I think we need to be very, very realistic about the grave impacts of a Donald Trump election. It is not a joke. It is not a game. We need to protect our democracy, and ideally it's going to be on progressive values.
So there you go. This is not AOC moderating. She says that the whole point is to preserve democracy on progressive values, and whether progressives like it or not, in the short term, the immediate move is to endorse the Democratic candidate, which will almost certainly be President Biden. Dean Phillips is a non-starter. Marianne Williams has dropped out. But again, it's not just AOC. It's also the elder statesman of the modern American progressive movement, Bernie Sanders, who ran against President Biden in 2020. This is what he had to say just a few days ago in terms of making the case for President Biden in this upcoming election.
You have a president, former president, who really does not believe in democracy. He's trying to undermine democracy. He is a pathological liar. And he is, in very intense ways, trying to divide our people up. Look, this country faces enormous problems today, and we all know what they are. We're talking about income and wealth inequality. We're talking about 60% of workers living paycheck to paycheck. We're talking about the existential threat of climate change, enormous problems facing this country. But instead of focusing and providing solutions to those problems, what Trump is trying to do is get us to hate each other based on where we were born or the color of our skin or our sexual orientation. And we just cannot allow that to happen. And then on top of all that, you got a guy in Trump who, during his presidency, gave massive tax breaks to the rich at a time when we have unprecedented income and wealth inequality. It's the last thing they need. This guy wants to throw tens of millions of people off of the health insurance that they have. He appointed anti-union members of his administration to make it harder for workers to form unions. And I'll tell you, all over this country, women are fighting for the right to control their own bodies. He wants to take that away. So that's Trump. And on the other hand, in Biden, I'm not going to sit here. I ran against Biden, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I agree with everything Joe Biden is doing. I don't, big time. But on the other hand, this is the first president in the history of the United States to walk on a picket line with workers. And that's a pretty impressive thing. We've made some progress in lowering the cost of prescription drugs and taking on the pharmaceutical industry. The economy, as you've indicated, is really doing well. Unemployment extremely low. We're creating a whole lot of jobs, rebuilding manufacturing in America. So we're beginning to move forward in the right direction. In my view, we have a lot more to do. But the choice in this election is very clear.
Again, I think that is a perfectly compelling case to make for those who are progressive and someone who considers himself progressives. The fact of the matter is, somebody once told me that your politicians should be like, you should consider them like public transportation, as unflattering as that is. If you have a certain destination and you have a choice of public transportation and your two options, neither of them get you directly to the end destination, but you have a choice between a bus which takes you in that direction versus a bus which goes in the opposite direction, or I suppose a bus that just stays parked, doesn't move at all, then the rational choice, not just for yourself, but for those around you, for those who would be affected directly and materially by the outcome of this particular election, the nation's most influential and important office, then in this metaphor, you should get on the bus which takes you the closest to that end destination of your available options. And again, you can hear it in his advocacy. Neither Bernie Sanders nor AOC have, relinquished or have forfeited their progressive bona fides. They maintain those values, and both of them clearly still have fundamental, important disagreements with the president. But they recognize, they refuse to bend to this false equivalence. They recognize that Joe Biden on his very worst day is objectively better than Donald Trump on his very best day. Besides which, Politico, which is usually trash at times, to be quite candid, a hive of enlightened centrism, they put out a really good article called 30 Things Joe Biden Did as President You Might Have Missed. And I encourage you all to check it out. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they break it up into various aspects. Labor, for example, expanded overtime guarantees for millions of Americans, and then they go into the specifics of it. Healthcare, first over-the-counter birth control pill to hit U.S. stores in 2024. Again, they go into specifics. Gun prevention, gun violence prevention, and gun safety get a boost. They go into detail. As a matter of fact, Maxwell Frost worked with the president to open the first executive branch office of gun violence prevention, and so on and so forth, to say nothing of the major pieces of legislation that President Biden has had passed during his administration. He's just been a much more legislatively and executively competent president than Donald Trump or really any Republican, and many of these things are working to the benefit of the American people. So, as Bernie Sanders says, he still disagrees with with Biden on plenty of things. But the fact of the matter is, there has been meaningful progress for Americans in this country, and also there's a lot more to do, which is why President Biden's campaign slogan is, let's finish the job, right? 4 more years of a Democratic presidency, and if we're able to reclaim the House and at least maintain in the Senate or potentially expand, there's a lot that we could get done that's really important and that would materially benefit the American people. So I think AOC and Bernie took a risk here. Reputationally, they have suffered some degree of blowback already for their endorsement of President Biden. But I like the fact that by the courage of their convictions and because they so staunchly believe in their progressive values, they make it abundantly clear that it is vital that a Democrat maintain control of the White House in 2024. So I definitely encourage you to check those articles out, or that article out on Politico. Let me know what you think in the comments about Bernie and AOC's endorsement of President Biden.